Welcome to The Fight on Matrix Midwest with Randy Carricker.
Hi kids, and welcome to the show. It is great to have you with us, and we have a lot coming up. Brooks Koepka won the PGA Championship here in St. Louis in 2018, but he won't be here in a couple of weeks for the BMW Championship. More drama surrounding Sophie Cunningham, the Mizzou grad in the WNBA, and we're going to take a trip around the horn with MLB news and notes. But first, it's time for your quick hits, and they are sponsored by our friends at St. Luke's. And as the Cardinals took 2 of 3 from the National League bottom-dwelling Rockies over the weekend, those are games the Cardinals should win and did twice in 3 tries. The Redbirds are getting a lot of good news as they got back to 500 with yesterday's win. Jordan Walker hit a long home run on Saturday. This is it. That broke a month-long home run drought for him since before the All-Star break and since he won the home run derby in Philadelphia. Walker had another RBI yesterday, and the Cardinals got great work out of Michael McGreevy, 5 2/3, allowing 3 runs in impressive heat. And then J.J. Weatherholt, in a tie game in the 8th inning, Weatherholt came through with the game-winning hit, and the Cardinals were able to knock off the Rockies by a score of 7-6. Now, the last trip through the starting rotation, Hunter Dobbins, 6 1/3 innings, 2 runs on 4 hits. Andre Pallante, 5 1/3, 1 run on 3 hits. Kyle Leahy, 2 runs on 8 hits. Matthew Liberatore, 5 innings, 5 runs on 9 hits on Saturday. And then Michael McGreevy, 5 2/3, 3 runs on 8 hits in impressive heat, as we mentioned yesterday. The only guy really struggling in that rotation is Matthew Liberatore. And when he's good, he's really good. But when he struggles, he really struggles. In games where a pitcher goes between 5 and 6 innings and allows 3 or fewer runs, Liberatore has done that 11 times, 5 or 6 innings, 3 or fewer runs. But he has other starts where 12 times he's remarkably inconsistent and doesn't have that start. He's going less innings or allowing more runs. He needs to be a more consistent pitcher. And if he gives that 5 out of 6 every 6 starts, Cardinals will be really happy. The other 4 starters, by the way, have the Cardinals really happy right now. All right, let's turn to football. And after his car accident, Kyle Shanahan is going to coach the 49ers in his preseason opener this coming week. Of course, Shanahan has been delayed in coaching because of that car accident in mid-July.
I think everyone's done to a degree what I've done, but dropping a phone and falling all the way to my back seat to where I have to fully take my eyes off the road. It's something that I normally want to do. I've had autopilot for 9 years, so I'm pretty comfortable with it. And who knows what happened when I turned around, whether it malfunctioned or whether I knocked it off. That's something I don't know yet. But regardless, it is always your fault, whether you're an autopilot or not. You can't take your eyes off the road. It's a partnership driving. You don't just turn it over to a computer. And it's a good lesson, no matter how comfortable I am with that I believe someday could save my life or someone else's. Or it's really helped me have perspective on that stuff.
All right. Speaking of good lessons, it bothered some in the talk show space that they didn't know about the wreck immediately. And Dan Le Batard was among those that tried to suggest nefarious activity before getting the facts.
I don't know what happened here either, but it doesn't sound right to me. 20 miles an hour, you were fishing for your phone, you never hit the brakes, and now you have the kinds of injuries that you almost lost your eye. I just didn't know it was possible at 20 miles an hour to be so oblivious. If you were not passed out at the wheel, if you're driving your car, I didn't think that it was possible at 20 miles an hour to be so oblivious that you never hit your brakes and you're getting an airbag in the face that you weren't expecting in any way. I didn't think that could happen at 20 miles an hour.
Now, wouldn't it have been great if, rather than drum up some conspiracy theory, Le Batard had gotten the facts that Shanahan's Tesla was on autopilot, and that's why he was oblivious to what was going on? I defend this business a lot. I'm in it. And Le Batard was far from the only one questioning this wreck. But it sure is better to tell a story when you have the facts. And, oh, by the way, and I've had this happen, when you have airbags deploy, they are hard and they happen in a hurry. And yes, you do have injuries. People do break ribs. People do get cut up faces from airbags. And that's one thing that Dan Le Batard also didn't understand. And I wish he would have moved a little bit more forward with knowledge before spouting that opinion. We mentioned last week in college basketball that Robbie Avila would be able to return to college basketball if he wanted to because of a court ruling that allowed 80 college basketball players to return for another year of eligibility. We'll see how it all plays out, but one guy that is not happy is UConn coach Danny Hurley.
Now you can screw up high school recruiting, you could screw up portal recruiting, not have a very good team, and now start plucking from a group of players in August and put together a team. It makes it tough, you know. It's you know, like when we put together our team that had been, you know, we did the best we could do in high school recruiting. You know, now you've got this selection of portal players. You put together the best team you can. You start practicing for the summer, and now let's unleash 80 players into the sport in the first week of August. I mean, we can't go on like this. I mean, no other sport is going like this. And anyone that acts like it's great, it's fine, it's good for college basketball, they've already taken the stance that this is what they've wanted, and now they're just defending their position.
You can build a team, but it's impossible to build a program now. And the Senate didn't vote on the Protect College Sports Act. More on that later in the show. But I feel for a guy who does work hard at recruiting high school players, does work hard at the portal, and then all of a sudden there's 80 new players. And if you decide, oh, I had a terrible team, 80 new guys are on, like Robbie Avila, guys like that. 80 new guys are available to turn a bad team into a good team 2 months before we start the season. The PGA Tour playoffs are set with the St. Jude Classic on tap next weekend before the BMW Championship here in St. Louis. One guy who won't be participating in the playoffs is the guy that won the PGA at Belle Reve in 2018, Brooks Koepka. He needed to be in the top 70 of the FedEx Cup standings, and he finished 93rd.
Ball struck it great. It's just all in the green, so I don't know what the deal is. Got zero confidence, can't putt. I don't know. There can be a lot of changes here soon.
How disappointed are you to not advance to the
Yeah,
playoffs?
pretty disappointed. I think it's pretty pathetic that I can't get through. 0 top 10s basically in 2 years, so that's to be in the prime of your career and be as good as I think I am. I think that's very pathetic, disappointing. Just need to go home and completely reevaluate everything.
Maybe the reevaluation should have taken place before he left for LIV. It's really hard to leave this venue where it's so competitive week in and week out, go to a place where you don't have to win, and then get used to it. And I have to believe that that's one of the things that happened to Brooks Koepka. He lost that competitive edge that he had had. Now, when you lose your putting stroke, that hurts too. But here's a guy that was in it for the money. And I'll be interested to see and hear what sort of changes he feels like he needs to make to get into that top 70 next year. He was in his prime 8 years ago when the PGA was here in St. Louis. Brooks Koepka, he just said it, he's in his prime. He's not anymore. Others that missed the top 70, by the way, Keegan Bradley, Jason Day, and Tony Finau won't be participating in the playoffs either. Kids, the WNBA has a problem. There isn't enough focus on basketball. Mizzou's Sophie Cunningham made a comment about trans people playing in the WNBA in February, and the fallout from the comments hasn't really subsided, even though she said last week she hoped it would.
There's so much good going on in the WNBA. I think that basketball is being played at the highest level it's ever been. I think our team in specific, we are breaking history right now with the amount of points that we're scoring on back-to-back games. I think the Minnesota game, there's just so much distraction. I think the WNBA media, all we ever do is cover everything except basketball.
And while playing on Saturday, playing basketball, this happened. Cunningham fouled hard by Chicago's DeJounte Carrington. And Carrington, as you might expect, wound up with a flagrant 2 and got thrown out of the game. And there you see, we had a little kerfuffle there. No punches thrown or anything like that, but it was a flagrant 2, and that gets you ejected. So what did DeJounte Carrington do? She went right to the locker room. She picked up her phone and put these 2 words on social media: white privilege, and then at Indiana Fever. So what are people talking about in the WNBA the last few days? Definitely not basketball. We're talking about DeJounte Carrington. We're talking about a hard foul. We're talking about still Sophie Cunningham. This is one thing that the WNBA and the game itself is fun. It's fun to watch. The women are terrific players, but they need to focus on the basketball. I heard a description one time of the NBA as a soap opera for guys, which it kind of is. There's drama all the time. But you know what? These days, right now, as they get started, and they're still, because really the WNBA became a thing when Caitlin Clark came along a couple of years ago. Rather than being a soap opera, they need to get into basketball and have us watch basketball before the soap opera thing pops up. Those are your quick hits, and they're sponsored by St. Luke's. Top-notch doctors in everything from heart health to orthopedics and more. Visit stlukes-stl.com today. Later in the show, we're going to have a daily wager for you. And after a win this weekend, I'm really excited. We're going to tell you what our next bet is. And next up, we give you baseball news and notes as we take a trip around the horn here in The Fight. It's time for a trip around the horn. You see the little horn? Oh, I got to go this way. There you see a trip around the horn as we bring you MLB news and notes. And let's start with St. Louis and Max Scherzer. He passed Walter Johnson on the all-time strikeout list with number 3,514 over the weekend. The game has changed a lot, and it's important to compare pitchers to guys in their own era. It's not fair to compare Scherzer to Walter Johnson or Bob Feller or Bob Gibson, but in his era, it's been Scherzer, Justin Verlander, and Clayton Kershaw, who are all in the top 6 among active or recently active pitchers in these categories. In WAR, Verlander 82.3, Kershaw 78.1, Scherzer 74.1. ERA, Kershaw 2.53, Scherzer 3.36, Verlander 3.33. Strikeouts per 9, Scherzer 10.5, Kershaw 9.6, Verlander 8.9. By the way, none of those three are way at the top in strikeouts per 9. Scherzer leads them at 7. In whip, Kershaw 1.02 walks and hits per inning pitched. Scherzer 1.08, Verlander 1.13. And the big ones for now, innings pitched. Verlander 3,571. Scherzer 2,909 innings, 99 innings. And Kershaw 2,855. In starts, Verlander 556, Scherzer 483, Kershaw 451. Next is Patrick Corbin, 62 starts, 2 seasons behind Clayton Kershaw in number of starts. In wins, Verlander 266, Kershaw 223, Scherzer 222. There's something to be said for guys that take the ball for years and years, and that's what Scherzer has done. And there's a reason, aside from the fact that it was the Mets, that Scherzer and Verlander got deals at $43.3 million a year, the most ever for starting pitchers. You don't get starts for that long if you can't pitch, and Scherzer still does. By the way, when I was a kid in 1974, Bob Gibson joined Walter Johnson as the only pitchers with 3,000 strikeouts. MLB was 98 years old at that point. In the last 52 years, Johnson has fallen to 11th on the all-time strikeout list. Gibney is 16th with his 3,117 Ks. One other note, by the way, about Max Scherzer, who you may or may not know wanted to become a Cardinal when he was a free agent for the 2015 season. How different would life have been had Max Scherzer come to the Cardinals? If the Cardinals had engaged, he got Adam Wainwright on board, and Wainwright went to the Cardinals and said, Scherzer wants to be here. He's going to give you a hometown discount. He wants to come home and pitch. Cardinals never engaged. If Max Scherzer is a Cardinal starting in 2015, does that 100-win team beat the Cubs in the playoffs and maybe beat the Mets in the playoffs and go and beat the Royals in the World Series? Do they win that one with Scherzer available to them? Does Mike Matheny ever get fired in 2017 if Max Scherzer is a member of the team? In 2019, do the Washington Nationals, without Scherzer, win the World Series, or do the Cardinals, who were in the NLCS that year, do they win the World Series? The ripple effect is enormous that the Cardinals never engaged Max Scherzer and could have brought him here. And oh, by the way, they would still have another, well, I don't know if he'd be here now, but they would have had another first ballot Hall of Famer that wore the birds on the bat for a significant period of time. It's a shame. He wanted to be here. All right, second base. Hey, keep an eye on the Padres. With the additions of starters Robbie Ray and Casey Mize at the deadline, they're going to be really, really tough. And they're already really, really deep. They expect to get starters Joe Musgrove and Nick Pivetta back later this month or in September. And the big thing is this. If they have a lead after 6, the game is over. It's kind of like the Royals' HDH back in 2015 with Kelvin Herrera, Wade Davis, and Greg Holland. Jeremiah Estrada is a seventh-inning guy. He throws 98 and has 31 strikeouts in 25 and a third innings. Then in the eighth, it's Adrian Morjon. He throws 100 and has 75 strikeouts in 62 innings. Then Mason Miller is their closer, and he throws 103 and has 91 strikeouts in 49 and the third. And with those guys, and there's nasty stuff from Adrian Morjon, and then even nastier we're going to see in a moment from Mason Miller. But with those guys, these are amazing stats. The Padres are 40-4 when leading after 6 innings. 40-4. When they lead after 7, they're 45-1. And when they're leading after 8, when Mason Miller is into the game for a save, they're 48-0. Again, 40-4, leading after 6. So they've only lost 4 times all year in more than 110 games when in the last 3 innings. In the last 2 innings, they've lost once. They're 45-1, and in the last inning, 48-0. That's a shutdown bullpen, folks, and that's what you need in September and October. Padres are going to be a problem for everybody else, including the Doyers in the National League, especially if Pivetta comes back reasonably healthy and reasonably effective, and Joe Musgrove, who was great for them before he got hurt, comes back reasonably healthy and reasonably effective. All right, third base, Tarik Skubal, as you know, is now a Dodger, and sounds like he's flabbergasted by the fact that the Dodgers have a players-only airplane, only team in baseball that does, and a massive clubhouse. He said he was looking for the sauna, and he wound up in a batting cage. But in an appearance on the Pardon My Take podcast, Skubal sounds like a guy that hasn't completely put Detroit in his rearview mirror.
It's tough for my end too. You know, I would love to play my whole career in Detroit. You know, I would love to, and hopefully those negotiations can pick back up in November. You know, once the playoffs are done, and we'll see where that goes. You know, hopefully they're involved with everything. You know, I would love to return. I got nothing but good things to say about the city of Detroit and you know, the manager, the coaching, the staff, the trainers, the teammates. Like, yeah, it's tough, you know, and I'm going to try not to cry right now, but yeah, I mean, I love all those guys. So hopefully they're involved in November, and, you know, we'll see what happens then.
Now, that was on Friday, a week after the trade deadline, about a week after the trade deadline, certainly a week after he'd been traded. And my guess is that in November, when he wants the Tigers to re-engage him, teams are going to be looking at December 1st and the end of the CBA and probably aren't going to be making huge offers to potential free agents at that time. And Skubal will command a huge offer. The Tigers traded him because his agent, Scott Boras, told them Skubal is going to go to free agency. And the price tag, pending a new CBA, is expected to be north of $400 million total. Hard to imagine that the Tigers in the current system will be able to afford that much for Tarik Skubal. Now, if he will go to Scott Boras and say, let's bring the price down, things might change a little bit. One other thing about the Boras demands here, $400 million, and Tarik Skubal is 28 years old. I don't think teams, even the Dodgers, are going to go $40 million a year for 10 years with a pitcher. And granted, he's already had his elbow surgery. But to go to the age of 38 is really a big ask. I could see teams going maybe 6 years and getting him to age maybe even 7 years at $40 million a year. So that'd be 280. I just don't see a team going 400 over 10 for Tarik Skubal, including the Dodgers. The only team crazy enough to do it would be the New York Mets. Down in Memphis, Nolan Gorman has hit 7 home runs in his last 7 games, and that brings us to home plate. Amazingly, Gorman has 10 hits overall in 38 at-bats in that span. So when you listen to it, our friend Derek Gould at STL Today writes that the Cardinals plan to see what kind of interest there is out there for Gorman this offseason. Gorman is arbitration eligible, under control through 2028, especially with a streak like this. He has intriguing left-handed power. Gorman's recent batted ball data is interesting. The exit velocity is up, the hard hit rate is up, obviously more home runs. Now, there is going to be someone out there that has interest in a guy who's 26, who has hit 27 homers in a major league season, granted he did it 4 years ago, and has found his power stroke, if not the ability to make consistent contact in the minors. If you're one of those franchises that likes to get guys and try to fix them, why not roll the dice on a guy like Nolan Gorman? And here's a great example. Max Muncy was 27 when he was released by the A's and signed by the Dodgers. And now he's 5th on LA's all-time home run list and has 4 30-homer seasons since the Dodgers picked him up at the age of 27. Look at what happened to Kyle Schwarber. He was 27 when he was non-tendered by the Cubs, 29 when he got to Philadelphia after stops in Boston and Washington. And now Kyle Schwarber has arguably been the best home run hitter in the National League with 220 home runs in the last 5 years. That's more than anybody, including Aaron Judge. So when you think about Schwarber, he'll probably hit another 10 this year, an average of 46 a year over the 5 years between ages 29 and 33. I'm absolutely taking a flyer on a Nolan Gorman, who's going to turn 27 next May. It's a no-lose proposition. He does have that kind of power. If he ever starts making contact, and by the way, he has taken some walks down in Memphis. If Nolan Gorman ever starts making consistent contact, the ball is going to fly. And I can understand why the Cardinals have been reluctant to move on from him. I was reluctant to have them move on from him. But I think with his last stretch here in St. Louis, where he went 3 for 50 with 27 strikeouts in those last 50 at-bats, I think that was a good time for the Cardinals to send him down. And maybe he winds up being on the 28-man roster in September and gets an opportunity. But I'd be surprised if he would be a Cardinal after the 2026 season. But I also wouldn't be surprised, kids, if he would wind up being a really good power hitter for somebody down the road. All right, now it's time for our takes on the weekend in the sports world. And let's start with golf. At the Wyndham Championship, 24-year-old Michael Brennan fired a final round 64 to beat Bo Hostler. Brennan surged up to 47th in the FedEx Cup standings heading into next week's playoff opener. The St. Jude Championship had to be in the top 70 to make the playoffs, so being in 47th is comfortably within the threshold. Hostler just missed the playoff. The top 70 made it, and he finished 72nd. Heading into the playoffs, Scotty Scheffler is in first place, followed by Matt Fitzpatrick, Cameron Young, Wyndham Clark, and Chris Gotterup. Defending champ Tommy Fleetwood is 9th, and Rory McIlroy is 12th. McIlroy did not play in the St. Jude Classic last year because he had enough points, and he would have enough points this year if he didn't want to play. But he is going to play in Memphis next weekend, and I'll be interested after a long layoff to see how well Rory McIlroy performs in Memphis. And the Senate didn't get to vote on the Protect College Sports Act before they started a 5-week break on Friday. There was hope that the act could be approved by the Senate and then Congress when they reconvene on August 31st. But now that the Senate doesn't come back until mid-September, the earliest the bill could get to the president's desk would be late September, early October, probably later than that, because there is going to be a level of consternation and negotiation once this bill gets to Congress. There's always going to be an argument. So I would guess that we probably won't see the Protect College Sports Act as a real law during the course of the college football season, which is what the ultimate and starting goal was. All right, that is our trip around the horn and our weekend highlights for you here in the fight. Coming up in the list, lots of first-time managers are succeeding these days. We're going to give you the list of guys that made it in their second jobs or later, next in the fight. All right, it's time for the list, and today's list is the best managers ever on their second or third job. You know, if the playoffs started today, 5 of the 6 American League managers and 3 of the 6 in the National League would be on their first managing job in Major League Baseball. It used to be that managers had to get experience before they won. Between 2003 and 2017, 14 of the 15 World Series champion managers were on their second job or more. Since 2017, 5 of 7 have been on their first job. So the tide has changed, and now first-time managers, people that are managing a team for the first time and aren't on their second or third job, are guys that are winning 5 out of the last 7. But we're going to go old school with the list, the managers that did the best in their second job or later. And we're going to start with former Tigers manager Sparky Anderson. After managing the Reds' Big Red Machine in the 70s, Sparky got fired in Cincinnati and served as the manager of the Tigers for 17 seasons from 1979 to 1995. And he cemented his status as the winningest manager in Tigers history. He guided the iconic 1984 Tigers team to a World Series championship after an incredible 35-5 start to start that season and a wire-to-wire division title. It was one of the great teams of all time. And when the Tigers won the World Series, Anderson became the first manager in Major League history to win a World Series in both the American League and the National League. In 1984, that 104-win Tigers team had a dominant postseason run. They defeated the Padres in 5 games in the World Series. He also managed Detroit to the 1987 AL East Championship and guided them to another crown during a spectacular 98-win campaign. A 2-time AL Manager of the Year, he won twice with Detroit, taking home the honors in 1984 and 1987, those 2 division-winning years. And he became the first skipper to lead franchises in both leagues to 100-win regular seasons. Why the Reds got rid of Sparky Anderson, who, by the way, came out of the Cardinals system, I will never know. But they had in Detroit a first-year manager by the name of Les Moss in 1979. And when Sparky became available, the Tigers fired Les Moss in his first year as their manager because Sparky Anderson to them was such a difference maker. So Sparky started there, had them for half a season in 1979, obviously became their all-time winningest manager and won the World Series for Detroit in 1984 on his second job, and Detroit was Sparky's final job. All right. Number 5 on the list is Terry Francona with the Boston Red Sox. After compiling a record of 285 wins and 363 losses with the Phillies in the late 90s, Francona cemented his legacy as one of the most legendary figures in Red Sox history by managing them to championships in 2004 and 2011. Actually 2004 and 2007, leading them to World Series championships in 04 and 07. His hiring ahead of the 2004 season transformed the franchise as Francona helped break that 86-year curse of the Bambino, of course, named for Babe Ruth, in his very first year at the helm. They swept the Cardinals in the World Series. That wasn't very much fun. Francona brought a perfect blend of modern analytics and old-school clubhouse management to a high-pressure market in Boston. He ranked second in franchise history for regular season managerial wins while holding the franchise records for both playoff games managed and postseason wins. In addition to leading the Sox to the 04 championship over the Cardinals, he was the skipper for the 07 team that beat Colorado too. Of course, after leaving Boston, Francona took a year off and kept Cleveland in contention for years. And now he's trying to do the same thing with the Reds. When Tony La Russa retired after the 2011 season and Francona had been fired by the Red Sox, Francona desperately wanted the Cardinal job. He loves the culture. Obviously, he had been with a legendary franchise in Boston. The Cardinals interviewed him, but they already had their heart set on Mike Matheny being their next manager. But you wonder how different things would have been had the Cardinals taken the offer that Terry Francona gave them to be their manager. He interviewed in Cincinnati with Mr. DeWitt, but obviously didn't get offered the job. And the Cardinals had some concerns because there had been allegations of some painkiller use by Francona in Boston, and that was a concern that the Cardinals apparently had. But it would have been interesting to see if you would have had another experienced world championship manager managing that team that Mike Matheny wound up, to his credit, taking to the World Series in 2013. All right, our next guy on the list, Bobby Cox with the Braves. After managing the Braves and then the Blue Jays, Cox returned to Atlanta as general manager in 1985. But he returned for a legendary stint in the dugout from 1990 through 2010, shifting from general manager back to manager. Cox led the franchise from worst to first, capturing 14 consecutive division titles, 5 National League pennants, and the 1995 World Series championship. Cox guided the team to that unprecedented 14 straight division title streak, spanning the NL West and the NL East, and they won the 1995 World Series against Cleveland. Cox retired from managing after the 2010 season and was inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame in 2014. He did a great job as the general manager putting together that core, and especially Smoltz, Maddox, Glavine, that wound up going to the World Series so many times. Actually, he was not the general manager anymore when they got Greg Maddox as a free agent, but he had brought John Smoltz into the mix. He had brought Tom Glavine into the mix, and then they go out and get Terry Pendleton, who's an MVP, and they did everything right. But he was the perfect guy for the perfect group in Atlanta. And by the way, in the perfect market. There was never anybody in baseball that didn't adore Bobby Cox. except for maybe some umpires because he was ejected more times than any manager in baseball history. But here he was on his third job. He had managed the Braves and failed. He had gone to Toronto and taken them to the playoffs and had a chance to go to the World Series Game 7 in 1985 for Toronto against the Royals, and they wound up losing that game. But then he gets to Atlanta, and as a manager, the second time around, everything was perfect. So Bobby Cox is number 4 on our list. All right, let's move to number 3, Bruce Bochy with the Giants. You know, Bochy managed the Padres for a dozen years before moving to the Giants for 13-season run from 2007 to 2019, and he led, of course, the Giants to 3 World Series championships. The Cardinals didn't help him out very much, by the way, by sweeping the Padres in 1996 and in 2006 in the playoffs. So Bochy couldn't wait to get away from San Diego because the Cardinals always tortured him there. Well, he led the Giants to those 3 world championships, and he's widely regarded as one of the greatest managers in history, defined by his time in San Francisco. Think about that, 25 years in San Diego and then San Francisco. He guided the team in San Francisco to World Series titles in 2010, 2012, and 2014, and established the famous even year magic. And they also had a chance, by the way, in 2016. At the break, the Giants in 2016 had the best record in baseball, but after the break, they had the worst record in baseball, and they weren't able to get back to the World Series. He accumulated 1,052 wins with San Francisco. That's second in franchise history, behind only Hall of Famer John McGraw. And Bochy earned a reputation as a tactical wizard for his precise bullpen management and ability to foster a tight-knit, winning clubhouse culture. Just a great human being that his players absolutely loved. After retiring from the Giants, Bochy left for a while and then came back to manage the Rangers to the World Series championship 3 years ago, and he re-retired after last season. Self-deprecating, he did a promo in San Francisco, and it said on KMBR radio, "Hi, I'm Bruce Bochy, and I do have an unusually large head," because he does. If we get any other video of Bruce Bochy, you might not recognize this, but he has a massive melon, but he also has a large brain, and that helped the Giants to 3 World Series championships, and then he won a 4th, and he is an easy Hall of Famer. Let's see if we can see Bruce Bochy here. I think he had like his head, I don't know if it was as big as Barry Bonds, but he must have had like a size 9 or a size 9.5 head here. There's Boch. Look how big that head is compared to the body. It's like a bobblehead. So that was some manager, Bruce Bochy. And by the way, my son, a huge Giants fan, so we had a chance to go down to spring training a few times and see him, and you wouldn't meet a nicer human being than Bruce Bochy either. All right, let's move to number 2. And you might think this would be number 1 here in St. Louis, but it's Tony La Russa with the Cardinals. Tony managed the White Sox and the A's before coming to St. Louis and won the 1989 World Series in Oakland, lost 2 other World Series. He lost in 1988. And that was to the Dodgers, obviously the Kirk Gibson home run team. Won in 89 against the Giants and lost in 1990 to the Reds. And then he came here and became the winningest and one of the most iconic managers in the history of the franchise. He led the Cardinals for 16 seasons from 1996 through 2011. And under La Russa's leadership, the Cardinals won 3 National League pennants, 2004, 2006, 2011. And 2 World Series championships, of course, as you know, in 06 and 11. Known for his tactical brilliance and pioneering bullpen usage, La Russa was inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame in 2014. Hired by Walt Jocketty back in 1996, Tony took over a struggling franchise that really wasn't committed to winning, and with the help of the ownership of the DeWitt family, he immediately led the Cardinals to an NL Central title in his first season. He steered dominant regular season teams fueled by Albert Pujols, Jim Edmonds, Scott Rowland, including that 105-win season in 04, and they had the MV3. La Russa won his first championship with the Cardinals with an 83-79 underdog, defeating Detroit back in 2006. And in one of the most dramatic months in baseball history, the 2011 Cardinals rallied from a 10.5 game back deficit in late August to secure a wild card spot and eventually win the World Series against the Texas Rangers. Of course, Tony retired in 2011 and may have made a mistake in coming back in the social media age and the media age and during COVID with the woebegone White Sox. After working some magic and leading the Sox to the playoffs in his first 2 years, including 93 wins in 2021, he was run off by the media and social media crowd as his team hovered around 500 the next year, had some health issues, and hasn't managed since. couple of things about Tony. Number one, the most competitive manager ever. And if you haven't heard, and I've told this story before, I would get into the ballpark as anybody who got there early would do. I would get there at about 2 o'clock, and Tony would be there early in the morning. And the first time you see him, you say, "How you doing, Tony?" And he'd say, "Has to be at 10:30," because that's when games ended at that point. There were 3.5 hour games. And his mood, his life, was dictated by having a W or an L next to his name. And the other thing was, and I don't know if you can do this now, he pushed his team in such a way that they loved being pushed. He didn't overdo it, but he was the reason that those teams were so darn competitive, because he hated losing and he was such a great motivator. And the expectation for winning every single day was intense. And it started at the beginning of spring training and it ended after the team was eliminated or had won the World Series. But there was just a push at the back of every single player every day by Tony La Russa. And I think at that time it was good for them. As a matter of fact, Mark McGwire, when Tony La Russa left Oakland after 1995, McGwire has said he thought that he would really like the relaxed atmosphere because Tony pushed so hard. But he realized very quickly that Tony was good for him, and he needed that push in the back every single day, and that's one of the reasons that McGwire agreed to come here, because La Russa was like a second father to Mark McGwire. Tony La Russa is our number 2. All right, and that brings us to number 1. The number 1 guy that did an amazing job in his second or third or fourth job as a major league manager is Joe Torre with the Yankees. After managing the Mets and the Braves and the Cardinals, the 3 teams that he had played for, to 1 playoff appearance in 14 years, Torre became a good manager and became famous for steering the Yankees through their legendary late 1990s dynasty. Managing the Bronx Bombers from 1996 to 07, Torre established a culture of calm leadership under mercurial owner George Steinbrenner, leading the franchise to 4 World Championships and 6 American League pennants. And there he is with a young Chip Carey getting interviewed after the 1996 World Series. When hired ahead of the 1996 season, local media famously mocked the hiring, labeling him Clueless Joe. Torre quickly proved those skeptics wrong by managing core personalities like Derek Jeter and Mariano Rivera and Andy Pettitte and Bernie Williams into a cohesive juggernaut and helping develop those young players. Under Torre's watch, the Yankees won championships in 1996, 1998, 1999, and 2000. He holds an MLB record by winning 14 consecutive World Series games, spanning Game 3 in 96 through Game 2 in 2000. The Yankees made the postseason in all 12 of Torre's seasons, capturing the AL East Division title 10 times. He finished his Yankees career with a dominant record of 1,173 wins and 767 regular season losses. That's a .605 winning percentage, ranking second in franchise history behind only Joe McCarthy. Torre's excellence earned him an induction into the National Baseball Hall of Fame as a manager in 2014. And on August 23rd of 2014, the Yankees permanently retired his number 6 jersey, cementing his place in Monument Park. Torre stands alone in baseball lore as the only individual to achieve both 2,000 hits as a player and 2,000 wins as a manager. One of the greatest ever, and it is amazing how you become a much better manager when you have better players. And I want to say this about Joe Torre, because we know the Yankees as the evil empire, where they got Clemens and they got A-Rod and they got Teixeira and they got Tino Martinez. Here's the thing about Torre. That group that he had in 1996 with like Scott Brocious at third base and Tino at first, and it was Knobloch at second and Derek Jeter. It wasn't a bunch of high-priced free agents. It was a really veteran Darryl Strawberry, Paul O'Neill, Bernie Williams, a young player, Tim Raines, Posada. It was amazing that that team was thought of as such a high-priced team, and that team was really developed and grew up as a young team that wasn't really high-priced under Joe Torre, yet they won their first championship since 1962, I believe it was. All right, that's the list. Coming up, we have the Daily Wager for you. Stick around for that, and it's coming your way next here in The Fight. Hey, I want you to know about St. Luke's Executive Health Program. If you're a guy and you're super busy and you feel like, I don't have time to get to the doctor, I don't have time for 3 or 4 appointments a year, check out St. Luke's Executive Health Program. It's a half-day, fully comprehensive physical, including labs, an EKG, chest x-ray, fitness evaluation, and nutrition counseling, all in one streamlined visit. You take one trip to St. Luke's, and you're done for the year. They have concierge service, they have a private suite for you, they have complimentary Wi-Fi, and the screenings that matter, heart health, cancer markers, metabolic panels, thyroid, vitamin D, and more are all part of the executive program. Go beyond the basics with optional cardiology and vascular and pulmonary and sleep and imaging add-ons available. It really is a difference maker, and it's so easy and streamlined for you, and it's at St. Luke's. See the St. Luke's difference for yourself. Call 314-205-6060 and ask about their executive program today, or you can just hop online and learn about it at stlukes-stl.com. We did it. We did it. We did it. Hey, we did it. We did it. We won on the Daily Wager for you in our last show last week. I told you that you could never go wrong with a profit, didn't I? Even if it's not a huge profit, you put down 100, you get back 140. So $40 that you get that you didn't have before. And we put that down for the Cardinals to win the series against the Colorado Rockies. The Cardinals did that, and so everybody who put the $100 down gets $40 back. So you're welcome for the free money. All right, let's give you another daily wager here. And let's take a look at tonight. You got the Doyers and the Royals. Now, the Royals have only struck out 932 times this year. That's the 7th fewest in Major League Baseball. But they're taking on Tarik Skubal. And I think Tarik Skubal wants to show the Dodgers that they did the right thing in trading for him. And he knows the Royals from pitching in the American League Central for such a long time. So let's take a look at this. Royals at the Dodgers tonight, and Skubal is plus 119 to get 9+ strikeouts. Or we can just go same thing. Over-under is plus 119. So 9 strikeouts for Tarik Skubal. So we're going to do that. We're going to go with Skubal against the Royals to wind up with more than 8.5, aka 9 strikeouts. And our bet right there is at plus 119. So let's take a look at what it'll be if we put $100 on that. And I'm guessing that we're going to do really well. So let me just hit the enter button here. Yeah, we're going to do really well. We're going to get $219 if Tarik Skubal strikes out just 9 Royals hitters. And the Royals are kind of scuffling. So let's see if we can get another win for you and see if we can dance a little bit more to Dora tomorrow. That is the Daily Wager. Coming up, we've got today's fun fact. Plus, we've got story time with Uncle Randy, and we've got this date in sports history. Stick around. It's coming your way next. All right, time for today's fun fact. And we're going to start with Juan Marichal, who on this date pitched the 50th shutout of his career, a 1-0 squeaker over Montreal. That was on this date in 1970. So he leads all active hurlers at that point with his 50 combined shutouts. And that was 55 years ago. He'd finished with 52. If you took the top 10 guys in shutouts in Major League Baseball right now, they equal 50. Verlander with 9, Alcantara, Cole, Gray, and Shelby Miller, and Max Scherzer with 5 apiece, Carlos Carrasco, Dylan Cease, Max Fried, Dallas Keuchel, all with 4. So at this point, on this date in 1970, Juan Marichal had 50 shutouts. Now, right now, the top 10 guys between them have 50. By the way, Marichal finished with 52. That is a fun fact, isn't it? All right, how about story time with Uncle Randy? And we're going to have Director Tyler spin the wheel for a decade and a sport, and we'll come up with a little story for you, and let's hope it's a fun time, 2000s, and we're going to do some 2000s hockey. So between 2000 and 2009, and as you know, the latter part of that decade was not great for the St. Louis Blues. But you know what was fun, and you still see some jerseys around, was when they signed Paul Kariya as a free agent, because you've got this young group, and the Blues have been struggling, and the Blues were a destination, obviously. You had people that wanted to be here when Brett Hull was here, and Gretzky wanted to come here, but then you kind of lost that. But to see the number 9 of Paul Kariya, and he had concussion problems here, and he didn't play great as a member of the Blues, but just to see a superstar join that group of players after the loss of Chris Pronger and actually the loss of all the stars that they had. That was pretty cool. And Director Tyler getting us a little Paul Kariya video here. He was such a good player and had such an unbelievably quick release. And we were fortunate to have Paul Kariya. I think he's an underrated member of Blues history. Did a great job. And so it was fun in the 2000s when the Blues, after the lockout and after all of the badness, got Paul Kariya in the fold, and he got to play here for a couple of years. All right, that is Story Time with Uncle Randy. Now it's time for this date in sports history. 1981 was not a great summer. There was a strike in baseball. Well, on this date in 1981, the Phillies' Pete Rose passed Stan Musial as the all-time National League hit leader when he collected hit number 3,631. There it is right there on the board at the vet, off of the Cardinal right-hander Mark Littell. By the way, that was the first day back after, and there's Stan with Pete Rose. That was the first day back after a 50-day strike that truncated the 1981 season. They played a split schedule, first half winners against second half winners to determine who was going to advance in the playoffs. And it took a while for fans to come back. As a matter of fact, the Cardinals' first game back after the 81 strike, they drew 21,194. And even though they were really good, and it was a fun team to watch because it was Whitey ball, it still took a while for the fans to come back. And that was a summer where I was an usher. That was actually my first summer being an usher, my first full summer. And so I had to find a real job during the course of the baseball strike, and that was not fun at all. And hopefully, because a lot of people got burned out or frustrated with baseball in that strike, I hope baseball ownership and baseball players, the union, can look at what happened. Go back 45 years and look at what happened in 1981 and how difficult it was for baseball to come back from that small one, 50 days, let alone 1994 when you didn't have a World Series. But the highlight of this is Pete Rose, and what a great hitter he was, 3,631, passing Stan the Man in Philadelphia on this date in 1981. He was a remarkable hitter and wound up, obviously, with 4,256, and there's another record that will never be broken in baseball. Hey, don't forget to check out Fastball. It's a 1-hour condensed version of the previous day's Cardinal game every day at noon and at 4 p.m. here on Matrix Midwest. If you ever miss a Cardinal game, then you want to check it out. And obviously, yesterday's victory was a fun one. So just check it out today at noon and at 4 right here on Matrix Midwest. Chip and Mark will have the call, and it'll be a lot of fun for you. And then Chip will join us, by the way, tonight at 5 here on Matrix Midwest. And if you ever miss us, you can catch the show on matrixmidwest.com or on the Matrix Midwest app, where you can listen to our podcast in your car. Just hook it up on the Bluetooth, and you can listen to us on every single podcast platform. Just look for The Fight on Matrix Midwest. And also search for First Alert 4, or First Alert 4 on. We're on there every night at 7, wherever you stream. Tyler Klaus has done a magnificent job as our director, as he always does, and I hope that you've enjoyed being with us. I enjoyed having you with us. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time here in The Fight. So long, everyone.